done a single locomotive documentary in a while, and I decided to pick something that I just feel like talking about because no one else is talking about her. And I just have one question for you people. Where's the baby? Where is she? There should be an adorable baby around here. I would like to see the baby. Oh, there she is. Wow, that's upsetting. That's number 31. Or, well, actually, some people call her number 7312, or you could also call her 118, or 1708, or 7157, or 7240. She's had quite a few different numbers over her lifetime. But to the people at Strasburg, usually they just call her number 31. And she was the very first steam locomotive to run on the newly founded Strasburg Railroad. Rather, the heritage version of the railroad, not the original. Strasburg as a railroad dates back quite a number of years. Originally chartered all the way back in 1832, but these days most people in the know it as one of the best heritage railroads in America, certainly one of the best on the East Coast. They have quite a number of different steam locomotives. They run trains pretty much all the time, get over 300,000 visitors per year. They are among the golden children when it comes to successful heritage railways in the modern day. And the very first locomotive they utilized in that form was number 31. But she didn't start her life with Strasburg, not at all. Number 31 was constructed all the way back in August of 1908. By Baldwin Locomotive Works for the Grand Trunk Railway. Her first number ever was 118. And she was always teeny tiny even in her day. She's known as an 09A class, 060 switcher type steam locomotive. The intention behind her build was to make an incredibly small steam engine that could do switching duties in yards. We in America didn't get on with a lot of the tank engines. Most of the bigger railways didn't really use them all that much. There were a handful, but not nearly as much as, say, the United Kingdom. Most of our switching/shunting steam locomotives were still tender engines, but adorable teeny tiny ones. And that's effectively what number 31 was. And she was considered a very successful design in that particular purpose. She could move stuff around, work reliably, a perfectly serviceable steam locomotive. Though she'd be renumbered in 1919 to number 1708, and then just a few years later, in January of 1923, the Grand Trunk Railway would no longer be the Grand Trunk Railway. They merged into the Canadian National Railway. Just 3 months after the merger was completed, she was renumbered again to 7157. And that number lasted until 1952, when she was given the number 7240, and then in 1957, she again got renumbered to 7312. Outside of her renumbering, there isn't a whole lot to say about her existence because she was just a switcher. All she did was move stuff back and forth in the yard. An incredibly important and useful job to have, but not one that really set itself up for anything amazing. She didn't pull any expresses, she didn't do anything phenomenal, but she did her job, and did it well, for literally half a century. But in July of 1958, it was time for her to retire. Mostly because Canadian National was starting to dieselize, as were most of the railways, and all the steam engines were put on the chopping block. 7312 was likely going to be scrapped, and she was put off to the side at Stratford, Ontario, which also happened to be the last place she'd been working. She sat there for a couple years, not yet being sent to scrap until she was discovered by a man, Bud Swearer. Bud was the vice president of the newly founded Strasburg Heritage Railroad, SRC, and frankly, he liked the look of 7312. She was a cute little engine, and her size meant that they didn't have to spend a lot of money to get a hold of her. See, in the early days, it really wasn't known how well the Heritage Railway thing was even gonna go. It was very experimental, it was a new thing to do. In the modern day, we know that this type of thing can definitely work, and Strasburg definitely did, because they're still around, one of the most successful ones. But back then, they weren't really sure, and they didn't have a lot of money to work with. They couldn't necessarily afford to throw a massive quantity of cash at a larger express locomotive, and even if they did, well, those larger locomotives are more expensive to run in general. But 7312 had the benefit of both being cheap to get in the first place, as well as being much cheaper to operate by steam locomotive standards, just because she was so small. And since at the time, once again, they weren't sure how well they were gonna do, well, the trains were expected to be relatively short, even though she wasn't designed for passenger service. Given the expectations over at Strasburg at the time, getting a hold of her made a lot of logistic sense. Plus, they were also looking to do freight operations, which Strasburg still does, by the way. And because she was a switcher, well, she could pull whatever they wanted. Fine. Not great at either of them, but fine. They just needed a locomotive to pull the stuff. So, Strasburg negotiated with the Canadian National Railway to set up the sale of 7312 to them. She wound up being purchased by a consortium of Strasburg officials, and that action not only saved her own life, but saved her family from extinction. It should be mentioned that number 31 is the very last of her kind. There are no more 09s left at all. A total of 96 were built, and she's the only one that made it. 7312 would arrive at Strasburg in June of 1960, and that's when she was given the number that they generally refer to her by, simply 31. And she entered service on September 1st of that year, becoming the first steam locomotive to run on Strasburg's trackage in their new form as a heritage railway, but also the first steam locomotive to re-enter service in the United States. For most of that decade, she would be under the ownership of those Strasburg officials, but in 1968, she was purchased from them by the railway itself, and has been under their ownership ever since. And if I just stopped the story there, that'd be a pretty happy ending. After all, 31 is in a very safe place, one of the best places she possibly could be. A heritage railway, a very successful one, and as the last of her kind, she's likely well protected. And she is protected. She's not going anywhere. But nowadays, if you go to Strasburg, you don't get to see her run. At all. It's literally impossible at the moment. Number 31 would eventually be taken out of service in October of 2009 in order to undergo her very heavy and extensive FRA 1,472-day inspection and overhaul. And since that time, she has remained undergoing that overhaul. It still, to this very moment, hasn't been finished. And I bet you're wondering, why? Like, what the heck? What, like, it's Strasburg. Shouldn't those guys be able to get that done within, 2, maybe 3 years tops? Maybe even less if they really tried? And yes, Strasburg can get that sort of work done pretty quickly, depending on a number of factors. How much work the locomotive needs, how much personnel they have. I mean, it's not a guarantee how long it's going to take, but yes, a few years. 2 or 3 is a reasonable expectation from them. Can it be less? Yes. Can it be a bit more? Sure, I'm averaging here. But the point is that, wait, it's been like 16 years? Where's the baby? And the answer is, as I said, she's right there. She's sitting there, clearly not finished. And the reasons vary quite a bit. The most major problem they were starting to run into with 31 happened decades earlier, and that was Strasburg got very successful. And now you're all like, why the heck is that a problem? And, okay, from a, financial perspective, that's not bad at all, that's great. But for 31, this was an issue because the trains were getting longer. The railroad crews already didn't really care for 31. Not because she was hard to steam up or anything like that. Like, in operation, she worked fine, but because she's a switcher, not meant to pull trains down a long line, she had really rough riding. She shook and danced all over the place, just dancing down the line, and the crews just hated that. But even if that wasn't an issue, The other problem is that as a switcher, her tractive effort really wasn't that much. She's only an 060. So as the trains got longer, it became way more difficult for 31 to actually pull them. She was generally superseded when it came to actual tourist runs by the larger steam locomotives that Strasburg got a hold of. Even number 89, who's a 260, not that much bigger than her, is better when it comes to pulling the trains. And even she somewhat struggles. 31 just can't do it anymore. Which leads to the other issue that Strasburg, as a railway, is trying to figure out, what do we need her for? Because there just isn't much that 31 can do for the modern Strasburg when compared to what she once did for them. And you might be saying, well, don't they need to do switching duties on occasion? And yes, of course, she can do that in theory, but why would they bother steaming her up when they have a diesel number 8618 just checking around and, doing that exact thing much more easily? Like, okay, I mean, you can use 31 for switching, but it doesn't mean you necessarily should or would from a logistics perspective right now. That's kind of the big issue. The crews that did use number 31 know she's not very pleasant to work on because of the dancing she does. She's not powerful enough to effectively pull the modern trains that Strasburg uses. And because of the second thing, there just isn't much that they can do with her. Another big issue is that Strasburg does a lot of work in their shops these days, even contracting jobs from other companies or private owners of other rolling stock. I mean, Chesapeake and Ohio 614 is in their shop right this second, under restoration. They have a lot of work on their plate, and that work doesn't encompass getting 31 up to steam again, and it hasn't for many years. I recently visited Strasburg for, well, I've done that a lot, but I recently did again, and my father and I took the shop tour, which is where we saw 31 and got an explanation from the tour guide regarding her status. And as far as he was concerned, the issue is that no one really wants to work on her. There are too many other jobs to do, and a lot of them are just more important than fixing 31. So as a result, she's sadly been left to just sit. She's undercover in the engine shed, and I can't fathom she'd be in any danger of being scrapped. Strasburg is well aware of what she represents for them. She was their first engine in their modern form, and the last of her kind. She's too historically relevant for that to be a factor at all, and Strasburg's not really in the business of destroying steam locomotives, That's not really what they're about. So I think the worst case scenario we can expect with her is that she might be dolled up and given to the Railroad Museum across the street for static display, rather than actually restored to operation. But it's hard to say. In terms of best case scenario, well, maybe they will get around to fixing her eventually. But even if they started now, they doubled down and said, actually, the heck with 614, I don't care how big and impressive she is, we're gonna fix the baby, and everyone got together and did that, it would still probably take a couple years to get her back up to steam, and since that is absolutely not going to be what happens here, maybe one or two guys finally starts to feel bad for 31 and gives her a shot, it's still gonna take a while. So I don't think 31's gonna run anytime soon. She'll likely sit in that shed, in pieces, for at least, minimum, another 5 years. And that's just a guess. It could be longer. She could sit there for another 10 years. 15 years. It's hard to say. And if you're asking my opinion, well, I'm kind of torn. Because on one hand, I get it. Strasburg's reasons for the situation make sense. They have other work to do, a lot of financially relevant work for them. And fixing 31, it's a matter of what are they even going to use her for if they bother to do that. But on the other hand, I feel much sympathy for little abandoned locomotives like this that are stuck in situations where it just isn't optimal for them to be put back into service. And from a sympathetic perspective, my mind is like, how dare you fix the baby? Let us see the baby. She's the baby. Release her, you coward. But again, it makes sense. So yeah, that's the story of 31. She's not going anywhere, but she's not going to be running anytime soon either. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.